I found a voice memo that was never meant for me. Jess and I had been married 8 years. We lived in a 4-bedroom outside of Nashville, had 2 kids in elementary school, and by most external measures were doing fine. We weren't setting the world on fire, but we weren't struggling either. Solid. That was the word I would have used if someone asked. We're solid. The tablet was a second-generation iPad we'd stopped using when the screen cracked along the bottom left corner. It had been sitting in the junk drawer in the kitchen for about a year before I pulled it out on a Sunday in March to see if it still worked well enough to give to my daughter for reading. I plugged it in, let it charge, and opened it up while Jess was at the grocery store with the kids. The screen crack hadn't gotten worse. I went through it to clear out the apps and found the voice memos folder with 43 recordings in it. Most were old. Grocery lists Jess had dictated. A reminder about a dentist appointment. A couple of short ones where she'd recorded the kids saying something funny when they were small, and she hadn't wanted to forget it. The most recent one was dated 7 months earlier, November, 12 minutes and 40 seconds long. The name on the file was just a string of numbers, no label. I pressed play without thinking much about it. It was Jess's voice, and then, a second in, another voice I recognized immediately, her best friend Rachel. They'd been close since college, the kind of close where Rachel had a standing invitation to our house and knew our Wi-Fi password and helped herself to the refrigerator. I'd always gotten along with her well enough, or I thought I had. The recording was mid-conversation, clearly accidental, the kind of thing that happens when a phone records something from a pocket or a bag, but it was clear enough. I listened to the whole 12 minutes standing in my kitchen. The short version is this: Rachel had been coaching Jess for at least the length of that conversation, and from context it was clear it wasn't a new conversation on how to build a case for divorce. Not because Jess had told Rachel the marriage was over, but because Rachel had decided it should be and had been working backward from that conclusion for what sounded like a long time. Rachel was telling Jess to document things, write down incidents, she said, dates and times, not because they were necessarily serious, but because you want a record. She said Jess needed to protect herself financially before she made any moves, that she should talk to someone at a law office before she said anything to me. She said, and this is the part that made me sit down, that the version of her marriage Jess had been describing to her sounded like emotional unavailability, and that a good attorney would know how to frame that. Jess's voice in the recording was not the voice of a woman who'd already decided. She sounded uncertain, a little flat, like someone sitting with something they hadn't fully committed to. She said a few times that she wasn't sure, that things weren't bad exactly, that she didn't know what she wanted. Rachel's voice had none of that uncertainty. I put the tablet down and sat at the kitchen table for about an hour. I was not particularly angry at Jess. I was trying to understand what I was actually dealing with, which was either a marriage that was failing in ways Jess hadn't told me about directly, or a marriage that was being guided toward failure by someone else, or both. Those required different responses. Jess came home with the kids and I helped bring in groceries and we made lunch, and I was normal all afternoon because I needed to think before I spoke, and because my kids were right there. That night, after the kids were down, I told Jess I wanted to show her something. She sat on the couch, and I played the voice memo from the beginning. She went very still about 30 seconds in. I let it play to the end. When it stopped, I put the tablet on the coffee table between us and waited. She said, "Where did you find that?" I told her. Then I said, "I need you to tell me if there's a conversation we should have been having that we haven't had." She was quiet for a long time, long enough that I had my answer before she spoke. "I've been unhappy," she said finally. I didn't know how to start saying it. I said, "How long?" "A couple of years, on and off. Nothing you did specifically. I just stopped feeling like we were." She stopped. "I talked to Rachel because I didn't know who else to talk to, and Rachel told you to start building a legal record." She looked at the tablet. She was trying to protect me. I said, "From what, Jess? What did you tell her I'd done?" She didn't answer that directly, which told me enough. I asked her to tell me honestly whether she wanted to try to fix it, or whether she'd already made a decision she hadn't announced yet. She said she didn't know. I said that wasn't good enough anymore, that I needed an actual answer, and that I could handle either one, but I couldn't keep living in a marriage where my wife was recording evidence against me at her best friend's suggestion without knowing we had a problem. She cried. I handed her a tissue and waited. By the end of that night, we had agreed on 2 things. She was going to tell Rachel that the friendship needed some distance, at least for now, because Rachel's investment in the outcome had stopped being about Jess's well-being somewhere along the way, and we both knew it. And we were going to see a couples therapist, someone neither of us had ever talked to, and be honest in that room in a way we clearly hadn't managed in our own house. Rachel texted me the following week. She said she hoped I understood she'd only ever wanted what was best for Jess. I read it twice. Then I put my phone down and didn't reply. Jess and I have been in therapy for 4 months. Some weeks are hard, some are better than I expected. Last Thursday, our therapist asked us each to say one thing the other person did well that we'd stopped acknowledging out loud. Jess went first. She said I always showed up physically, for the kids, for the house, for her, even when she'd stopped noticing. It was the most honest thing she'd said to me in years. I wrote it down when I got home, not as evidence, just because I wanted to remember she'd said it.